I've spent my whole life trying to be the perfect son, the one who never disappoints, who always understands, who follows every rule without question. My parents were good people, honest, hard workers, and I grew up believing that if I did everything right, if I was obedient and responsible, I'd live a full and happy life. Today, I'm 74 years old, and I've just discovered a truth that has devastated me. My parents never told me the most important thing I needed to hear, and now, looking back, I realize how many years I wasted living the life they imagined for me, not the life I truly wanted to live. It hurts in a way I can't describe. It's like waking up from a long dream and realizing you were asleep while your life was happening. And the cruelest part of it all is knowing they didn't know either. They did the best they could with what they had, with what they'd learned. But their silence about certain truths shaped my entire existence in ways I can only now fully comprehend. I grew up in the 50s, a time when children didn't question their parents. You just obeyed. My dad worked in a factory. My mom took care of the house and the three of us kids. Life was simple, predictable, safe, or at least it seemed that way. I remember my dad coming home every night at 6 o'clock, always at the same time, always with the same tired look on his face. He'd eat dinner in silence, watch a bit of TV, and go to bed. On weekends, he'd fix things around the house or sit out on the porch smoking. My mom was even quieter. She cooked, cleaned, sewed our clothes, and at night, I'd sometimes hear her crying softly in her room. When I'd ask if she was okay, she'd always smile and say everything was fine. She was just tired. I believed her because I was a kid and because I wanted to believe her. At 18, it was time to decide what to do with my life. I loved to draw. I'd spend hours creating characters, inventing stories, imagining different worlds. I dreamed of being an illustrator, maybe working in advertising or animation. But when I mentioned it to my dad, he looked at me like I'd said the most ridiculous thing in the world. Art doesn't pay the bills, he said. You need a real profession, something stable, something that guarantees your future. He said he knew a manager at the bank who could get me a position as a clerk. I didn't want to work in a bank. The mere thought of being stuck behind a desk counting other people's money made me feel suffocated. But I looked at my dad, at the eternal weariness in his eyes, at his calloused hands, and I thought he knew what he was doing. He had experience. He knew the world. So I said yes. I started at the bank 2 weeks after graduating from high school. I wore a suit every day, a tie tight around my neck, shoes that hurt my feet. The first few months were awful. I'd wake up in the morning and feel a weight in my chest, a desire to run away, to disappear. But I'd swallow that feeling because that's what responsible men did. You don't quit just because something is difficult or uncomfortable. You persevere. My mom said I was lucky to have such a good, secure job, and she was technically right. The bank paid well for the time, had benefits, a pension plan, but every time I walked past a newsstand and saw illustrations, comic books, creative posters, something inside me ached. It was a silent ache, easy to ignore when you're busy surviving. At 23, I met Helena. She worked at a department store near the bank. She was beautiful, polite, came from a family similar to mine. We started dating, and in less than a year, we were engaged. My parents adored Helena. My mom said she'd make a wonderful wife, that I'd made a great choice. And Helena was wonderful, I won't lie. But when I think honestly about that period, I realize I got married because it was the next expected step. You get a job, you get married, you have kids, you buy a house. It was a pre-written script, and I was just following the cues. I never stopped to ask if that's what I really wanted. I never considered that maybe there were other ways to live, other possible paths. We had 2 children, Robert and Markia. And when they were born, I felt an overwhelming responsibility to be for them what my dad was for me, a provider, someone reliable, someone who guaranteed security. So I worked more, I accepted promotions, moved departments, took on more responsibilities. The higher I climbed at the bank, the less time I had at home. Less time with Helena, less time with the kids. But I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. I was giving them a better life, a bigger house, better schools, vacations once in a while. That was love, I thought. Sacrifice was love. My father died when I was 42, a sudden heart attack while watching television. He was only 65. At the funeral, I looked at the casket and tried to recall deep conversations we'd had, significant moments between us. But I couldn't. All that came to mind were silences, mute dinners, nods, practical advice about money and responsibility. We never talked about dreams, fears, regrets. I never asked him if he was happy, if he was satisfied with the life he'd built. And I realized in that moment that I didn't truly know my father. I knew his opinions on work and duty, but I didn't know his heart, his deepest desires, his secret doubts. A few months after the funeral, my mom started telling me things she'd never mentioned before. She told me my father had dreams when he was young, that he wanted to be a carpenter, work with his hands, create beautiful things. But his father, my grandfather, said carpentry wasn't a serious profession, that he needed something better. So my father went to work in the factory, a job he hated, that slowly consumed him for 43 years until his heart just gave out. My mom had dreams too. She wanted to study, become a teacher. But in her time, women of our social class didn't go to college. They got married and took care of the house. So that's what she did. And those moments I heard her crying in her room, that was dreams dying, piece by piece, year after year. And you know what hurts the most? Realizing I wasn't really living. I was just existing, fulfilling protocols, following a script that wasn't even mine. And I'm sure you feel it sometimes too, that sense of being trapped in a life that isn't the one you dreamed of. Tell me in the comments, do you also feel like you're living the life others expected of you? You can just write this: I'm living the life they expected of me because, and fill in the blank. No need for a lot of detail, but you know why this matters? Because when we share these things, we realize we're not alone. And maybe that's the first step to truly waking up. So tell me, are you living your life or someone else's? It took me a few more years to really process all of this. I stayed at the bank, continued being the responsible husband, the provider dad. But something had shifted inside me. I started paying attention to my kids differently. Roberto was 15 and loved music. He wanted to play guitar, maybe start a band. And I, on autopilot, almost repeated my dad's words. I almost said that music doesn't pay the bills, that he needed to think about the future. But I caught myself. I remembered my dad, the conversations we never had, the dreams he buried, and instead of discouraging my son, I bought him a guitar. Helena got upset, said I was being irresponsible. But I stood my ground, and you know what happened? Roberto blossomed. He practiced every day, formed a band with his friends, and even if he never became a professional musician, that guitar gave him something precious. It gave him permission to dream, to create, to be himself without apology. With Marcia, it was different but equally important. She was 18 and deciding about college. She wanted to study marine biology. Marine biology. We lived hundreds of miles from the ocean. It seemed absurd, impractical. But I remembered myself at 18, wanting to draw, and the deafening silence that followed when I mentioned art. So, I supported Marcia. I helped her research universities, apply for scholarships, find a path. Helena again thought I was being irresponsible, and maybe I was, by the standards I'd been taught. But I was learning that there's something worse than financial insecurity. There's dying slowly inside while pretending to be alive. When I turned 55, something in me finally broke for good. I was sitting at my desk at the bank, crunching numbers, and suddenly had a sort of silent breakdown. I looked around me, at the gray office walls, at colleagues with vacant expressions, at the computer blinking with meaningless data, and thought, is this it? Is this what I'm alive for? 37 years doing something I never wanted to do in the name of a security that feels more and more like a prison. I went to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and cried. I cried for myself, for my father, for all the abandoned dreams, for all the wasted years trying to be who others expected me to be. That night, I talked to Helena. A real conversation, perhaps the first truly honest one we'd had in decades. I told her I wasn't happy, that I'd never been truly happy at the bank, that I felt like I'd slept through the last 37 years. She was shocked at first, then angry, then sad. She said she thought we were building a good life together, that she didn't understand why I was tearing it all down now. And I tried to explain. I tried to say I wasn't destroying anything, that I was trying to save what was left of me before it was too late, but she couldn't grasp it. For Helena, security and stability were the pillars of a life well lived. Adventure, passion, dreams, those were luxuries, things irresponsible people pursued. So I made a decision that changed everything. I quit my job at the bank. At 55, with 20 years still before retirement, I walked away from the only profession I'd known in adulthood. Everyone thought I'd lost my mind. My colleagues, my brothers, even my kids were worried. What are you going to do? How will you pay the bills? Did you really think this through? No, I hadn't. If I'd thought it through, I probably wouldn't have had the courage. But for the first time in my life, I did something simply because I wanted to, not because it was expected, or safe, or sensible. I bought art supplies, watercolors, pencils, sketchbooks, things I hadn't touched in nearly 4 decades. My mother was still alive then, in her early 80s, and when I told her what I'd done, she cried. But she didn't cry from worry or disappointment. She cried with relief. She said she'd lost sleep at night, thinking I'd follow my father's path, that I'd die without ever truly living. She said she loved me, always had, but that she and Dad had made a terrible mistake. They taught us how to survive, but they never taught us how to live. They never told us it was possible, that it was okay to chase something beyond security and stability. They never gave us permission to dream. That conversation with my mother was one of the most important of my life. She was nearing the end of her life and finally saying things she needed to have said decades ago. She told me about her own regrets, about the choices she made or didn't make, about the silent ache of living an unlived life. And you know what broke my heart? Realizing she knew. She always knew something was wrong, that we were all caught in this cycle of purposeless sacrifice. But she didn't have the words, didn't have the courage, or perhaps didn't have the blueprint for how to do it differently. So she remained silent, and that silence became my inheritance, the prison passed down through generations. I spent the first few months after leaving the bank in a kind of fog. Some mornings I'd wake up in a panic, thinking I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But other mornings, when I picked up my pencils and started drawing, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, a sense of being in the right place, doing the right thing, being who I was meant to be. It wasn't about becoming famous or making money from art. It was about finally honoring that part of myself that had been silenced for so long. Helena and I eventually separated. It wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was sad, but honest. We realized we'd built a life based on expectations and social roles, not genuine connection or true love. She needed security and predictability in a way I could no longer provide, and I needed freedom and authenticity in a way she couldn't comprehend. We parted with respect, even affection, but also with the painful awareness that we'd spent decades together without truly knowing each other. My kids also had to reprocess a lot about me and about themselves. Roberto, who's 48 now, recently told me that my decision to leave the bank changed his life too, that it gave him permission to make brave changes in his own life, to prioritize happiness over security, to live more authentically. Marcia, who became a marine biologist and works in coral reef conservation, said she'll always be grateful I supported her dreams, even when they seemed far-fetched. She said she'd met so many people who gave up on their dreams because their parents convinced them they were silly, and that she was lucky to escape that fate. I'm 74 now, and I finally understand what my parents never told me. They never told me I had a choice. They never told me that security without purpose is just a comfortable prison. They never told me that working a job you hate, even if it pays well, is a slow form of spiritual suicide. They never told me it's okay to change your mind, to start over, to chase seemingly far-fetched dreams. They never told me that failing at something you love is infinitely better than succeeding at something that slowly kills your soul. And here's the most devastating thing of all. They didn't tell me these things because no one told them. My grandparents didn't tell my dad. My mother's parents didn't tell her. It was a silence passed down through generations, a prison built brick by brick, abandoned dream by abandoned dream. And I almost continued that cycle with my own children, almost repeated the same mistakes, the same silences, the same well-intentioned lies about what constitutes a life well lived. Do you understand the weight of that? Decades of my life, lost chasing a version of success that was never mine. A marriage that was more about fulfilling expectations than true love. Relationships with my kids that almost mirrored the emotional distance I had with my own father. All because no one told me. Because no one gave me permission because I was raised to believe my job in life was to be responsible, not happy. But here's what I've learned, and I hope you're truly listening. Your parents probably don't know how to tell you these things either. Not because they don't love you, but because they too were raised in silence, in expectations, in fear disguised as practicality. And if you're waiting for permission from them or from society or from any external authority to live the life you truly want to live, you'll be waiting forever, because that permission never comes. You have to give it to yourself. You have to be brave enough to disappoint some people, to make choices that seem irresponsible, to prioritize your soul over the approval of others. I think about all the conversations I never had with my dad, all the questions I never asked. Are you happy, Dad? Do you have regrets? If you could live again, what would you do differently? And I think about how our relationship might have been different if we'd had the courage for that vulnerability, that brutal honesty. But we didn't, and now he's gone. And those conversations will never happen, and I'm left with this emptiness, this sense of lost opportunity that nothing can fill. Don't make the same mistake with the people you love. Have real conversations. Ask the hard questions. Speak the uncomfortable truths. Because time is passing faster than you realize, and one day you'll wake up and the people you love won't be here anymore, and you'll be left with the crushing weight of all that was left unsaid, all that was held back in the name of peace or comfort or the fear of being vulnerable. And if you're a parent, please tell your children what my parents never told me. Tell them they have a choice. Tell them that security without happiness is a cruel illusion. Tell them it's better to try and fail than to never try and live with the eternal regret of not knowing what could have been. Tell them you love them regardless of the choices they make, even if those choices scare you or challenge your own beliefs about how life should be lived. Give them the permission you may never have received. Break the cycle of silence. Today, I spend my days drawing. I'm not famous. I don't make a lot of money at it. But every morning, I wake up with a sense of purpose, a deep gratitude that I'm still here, still able to create, still able to honor that part of myself that was silenced for so long. I have an honest, deep relationship with my kids. I have a few true friends, people I can be completely myself with. And I have peace. Not the numbing peace of conformity, but the vibrant peace of living authentically, even if that authenticity comes with uncertainty and risks. And here's the cruel irony. I'm happier now at 74 with less money, less security, less of everything I was told mattered than I ever was in those years of conventional stability and success. Happiness wasn't where they told me it would be. It was hidden inside me all along, waiting for me to be brave enough to acknowledge it, to honor it, to live it. So what are you waiting for? What permission do you need that you haven't given yourself yet? What dream have you buried because someone told you it was impractical? What life would you be living if you weren't so afraid of judgment from others or the consequences of following your heart? Because I guarantee you, reaching the end of your life with regrets about choices not made, risks not taken, dreams not pursued, is infinitely more painful than any temporary failure you might experience by trying. My mother died at 87. In the last months of her life, she told me something I carry with me every day. She said she was happy she lived long enough to see me truly happy, to see me finally being myself. She said it gave her peace, knowing the cycle had been broken, that I wouldn't die with the same regrets that slowly killed my father from the inside. Those words were a gift, but also a responsibility. Because now it's up to me to keep breaking the cycle, to keep speaking the difficult truths, to keep giving people around me permission to live authentically. And that's what I'm doing now, talking to you. I'm telling you what my parents never told me. I'm giving you the permission it took me decades to give myself. You don't have to live the life others expect of you. You don't have to choose security over happiness. You don't have to wait until retirement to start truly living. You can start today. You can make one small, brave choice today that honors who you really are, not who you think you should be. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this story resonated with you. Maybe you see your own life reflected in my words, in the silences I inherited, in the walls I built for myself. You're not alone in this. Millions of people are living lives they didn't truly choose, following scripts written by others, waiting for permission that never comes. This channel exists precisely to break those silences, to speak the truths that should have been spoken long ago. Subscribe here to get more real stories, more lessons that I and others learned too late, things that could save you years, decades of regret. Hit like if this video moved you, even if it hurt. And please tell me in the comments below what's the truth your parents never told you. Or even better, what's the truth you need to start living? Starting today, I'd love to read your story and know that somehow my words helped someone wake up before it's too late. The clock is ticking for all of us. Don't wait until you're 74 with a lifetime of regrets to finally start truly living.